One. Before we begin, I'd like to remind everybody that due to the nature and seriousness of the proceedings, I would ask and remind you to please exhibit the very best in your audience behavior. Today is obviously, and this weekend is going to be a time of remembrance for those who have served our country and who have given the very most that you can. What you'll hear today is a little bit of history regarding Memorial Day and how we remember it. You'll hear two readings, one from a middle school student and one from a high school student. You'll also hear a selection from the Lin-Wood band and some closing remarks. My hope is that at the end of our time here this afternoon that we can have something that you can take away from, something to think about, something to maybe share over the course of the weekend. At this time, I'd like to ask you to please join me in welcoming to the podium to give you a brief history of Memorial Day, Mr. Sean Hagan.
In the 1860s, the United States was gripped by its deadliest ever conflict, the Civil War. Americans killed Americans with all the latest technology produced by the blooming Industrial Revolution. Battles were fought from Vermont to Florida to Texas to Missouri. No state or town remained untouched by this conflict. Men fought in trenches and open fields in a desperate struggle to see which would fall first, Richmond or Washington. Ships at sea were sunk, ports shelled, and economic resources seized in the desperate struggle to force the other side to submit. In the end, this war claimed the lives of at least 620,000 American soldiers, serving in both the Union and Confederate armies. No conflict, before or since, has come close to that sad statistic. On May 5th, 1866, a year after the conclusion of the war, the town of Waterloo, New York, gathered to decorate the graves of local men who had died in the great conflict with flowers and flags. They wished to remember and honor the sacrifice of those that had died to preserve the Union. This observance, called Decoration Day by the people of Waterloo, is thought to be the first Memorial Day celebration. By 1868, veterans groups were calling for the national adoption of this day on the 30th of May. John Logan, a former Union general, called for the 30th of May, 1868, to be designated for the purpose of strewing with flowers or otherwise decorating the graves of comrades who died in defense of their country during the late rebellion and whose bodies now lie in almost every city, village, and hamlet churchyard in the land. Observances of this solemn holiday grew, town by town, state by state, throughout the late 19th and early 20th centuries. After World War I, former Confederate states began to move their observances to match the one in Union-backing states. In 1971, Congress passed laws that declared the holiday to be a national one, ensuring its observance across the country and setting aside a day off for most from work. Today, most towns in the nation put on parades and hold gatherings to mark the occasion. People take advantage of the long weekend to enjoy the usually beautiful early summer weather by going outside, perhaps seeing a ball game or taking a trip to the beach. Car dealers even offer big Memorial Day sales, trying to take advantage of the holiday atmosphere. In recent years, the tradition of decorating graves has fallen out of use in some parts, which I think is something of a shame. On this Memorial Day, it's important to remember that despite all the barbecues, baseball games, and big sales at car dealers, the holiday is fundamentally a simple acknowledgement of the fact that the lives we are privileged to lead, the freedom and safety we enjoy, are all based upon the willingness of men and women to sacrifice for us. I would encourage each one of you to set aside some time to think about the many who have died to give us a better life, and perhaps take a moment to put a flower or a flag on the grave of someone who has made that sacrifice. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hagan. And now for our first reading. The reading is entitled Dirge for Two Veterans by Walt Whitman and is read to you by Joshua Craig.
The last sunbeam lightly falls from the finished Sabbath. On the pavement here and there beyond it is looking, down a new-made double grave. Lo, the moon ascending. Up from the east, the silvery round moon, beautiful over the housetops, ghastly phantom moon, immense and silent moon. I see a sad presence, and I hear the sound of coming full-keyed bugles. All the channels of the city streets they're flooding, as with voices and with tears. I hear the great drums pounding and the small drums steady whirling. In every blow, the great convulsive drums strikes me through and through. For the son is brought with the father, and the foremost ranks of the fierce assault they fell. Two veterans, son and father, dropped together, and the double grave awaits them. Now nearer below the bugles, and the drums strike more convulsive, and the daylight o'er the pavement quite has faded, and the strong dead march enwraps me, and the eastern sky upbowing. The sorrowful vast phantom moves illumined, Tia's same mother's large transparent face, and heaven brighter glowing. O strong moon, dead march, you please me. O moon immense, with your silvery face you soothe me. O my soldiers twain, O my veterans passing to burial, what I have also given you. The moon gives you light, and the bugles and drums give you music, and my heart, oh my soldiers, my veterans, my hearts give you love.
Thank you, Josh. Just a quick, can we get one more quick round of applause for Josh? That is not... I know that Mrs. Krill has said this more than once, but it's never easy for students to get in front of their peers, especially of this large of a gathering, and speak. So I do appreciate your time. At this time, we're going to be hearing a selection from the Lin-Wood Band, led by Mr. Untersee. Our next reading is entitled Remember by Victor Kleinschmidt, read by J.C. Avery.
Someone's child, left long ago. A strange land, someone's foe. An unmarked grave, fields of green, resting quiet, just 18. Winds of freedom, wash us now. Remember him, this I vow.
Thank you, JC. I want to try and do something a little different for my remarks. So if you bear with me, I would appreciate it. And we'll kind of go from there. I'll swing around in the story in a moment. I grew up in a town called Milton, New Hampshire, which, if you've never been to Milton, friends of mine who live north of Franconia Notch refer to it as the southernmost North Country town in New Hampshire. If you took it and put it between Groveton and Lancaster, it would fit right in. When I was growing up, the biggest thing that you would hear about in regards to Memorial Day, and Mr. Hagan alluded to it already, was, for our biggest question as kids, was, is the Memorial Day parade going to be in Milton, or is it going to be in Milton Mills? Because that for us really meant what the rest of our day would entail. Was Meme hosting the barbecue, or were we? As time went on, and I was a freshman in high school, 6'3", 180 pounds, scrawny, uncoordinated, a little rough around the edges, kind of trying to figure out this whole high school thing. There was this senior. His name was Sean Hughes. Sean was 6'5", 230, big guy, physically imposing, and had a heart and a personality that would fill this gymnasium. No older than you are right now. Sean took an interest as a senior who was a leader, not just in me, but in others. Sean would go out of his way to make sure I had rides to practice. We would drive in his Ford Windstar minivan. That was a hand-me-down from his parents, Gail and Mike. He would see me coming out of practice, waiting for my parents to pick me up from practice, and he'd slide open the back end of the van with some other of the seniors and juniors who were much older than me, and I was firmly intimidated by. And he'd say, "Scott, what are you doing? Get in. We're going to bring you home." And he did every time. Had a heart of gold. Sean was also an individual who started to shape some of the beliefs I have and carry today. That as a leader in that school, he reached out, and even that scrawny freshman, of which I certainly was, tried to build me up, knowing that at one point that I would be in that leadership role. And when I got there as a senior, he reminded me of that very journey. We fast forward 3 years, and now I'm the senior. I'm going into my senior year. It's the summertime. And Sean had, after he had graduated, had enlisted in the U.S. Marines. He had a great interest in being a helicopter mechanic. Worked on them constantly. Came back and was excited about the whole thing. Would talk about it with that big personality and that heart of gold. I remember the summer going into my senior year, just driving around, coming home from, I honestly don't remember where over the radio we got news that Sean had died in a helicopter crash. Now, he had died while serving his country, doing what he loved. Now, if you imagine, I go back to Milton, and the best way I can describe it to you is the southernmost North Country town in New Hampshire, where I kid you not that the day that Dunkin' Donuts came in, that almost was a holiday. That when we all heard of Sean's passing, we were devastated. He was one of us, and he was gone. Sometimes we would think about, at the age of 20, wherever he was, that he wasn't going to grow up, he wasn't going to get married and have kids. Those things were no longer on his path. I can still remember us getting ready for his services. We had found that there was such a feedback for folks who wanted to attend, both who lived in the community and without, that our local church was unable to accommodate just the mere capacity of people. So we held it in the next biggest place in town, the high school gymnasium. Such an interesting place to have services where you'd be playing basketball and volleyball. But I can still remember to this day, the same way that I'm talking, as clearly as I'm speaking to you, I can still hear the bagpipes playing from the military procession that was given for the services. I can still remember where I sat. I can still remember walking my mom from the top of the bleachers down to his casket, which laid in front of the stage, to say goodbye to Sean, to say goodbye to my friend. Afterwards, we would do many different events to help Gail and Mike. We would also do things to commemorate him. If you go into the Newt High School gymnasium even today, Sean's baseball uniform still hangs on the crow's nest. Kind of a sacred piece of history for our school. It's safe to say that Memorial Day for me changed after Sean's passing. And the questions changed from having, where's the parade going to be, to now I had a personal connection. That was the first time I had ever lost a peer. So now we were thinking of him. I tell that story to you because I was thinking about this the other day, about what we were going to say today. And I find that every year I say the same thing. Take some moments to think about somebody else. Take some time. But they just seemed I was falling a little short. So I wanted to make a personal connection to it. Sometimes life moves a little fast. And it's good to have a reminder and a time to stop and take some time to say thanks for what we have and remember those who've given their all. I would ask that over the course of this weekend, for as much as I hope you enjoy the barbecues and the parades and the baseball games and maybe even a deal at a car dealership, I would ask that you do take that time. I would highly encourage you to take some time over the next 3 days and then moving forward, spend it with your loved ones. Spend that time with the ones that you care about and the ones that care about you. Take some time to remember those who have sacrificed so very much. I know that Sean will be in my thoughts. Thank you. At this time, you're going to be hearing the playing of taps. Of course, for Memorial Day, the difference being to pay respects to those who have passed along. We will be listening to taps, and at its conclusion, out of mere respect for it, you are to rise and exit silently. That is one of the big differences when you hear it played in other venues. You are to exit the gymnasium silently. You will return to your 7th period class. I thank you so very much for your time and attention this afternoon.